Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Stephen Brown from the ACLU of Rhode Island. I'm here to express our general support for Article 20, but also to raise some questions, concerns, comments. You have written testimony from us. I should note that that is from the original version of the bill, not the sub-A. We will be reviewing the sub-A. What I'd like to do is just very quickly go over a few more general points for the committee's consideration as it considers how this bill should be amended. One, you've heard a lot of talk about the medical and the adult program. I think it's really important that whatever law is passed make clear that there are certain restrictions on the adult use, there are certain restrictions on the medical use. Our concern is that the way, at least the original version of the bill is worded, it's unclear sometimes. There are restrictions that are put in the adult use section that might be interpreted as applying to medical use as well, and we want to make sure there aren't inadvertent restrictions put on the medical use that should not be there. Related to that, we do have concerns in the medical part of the statute about specific restrictions that are being put in there. You've heard about a few of them. There's a requirement of a showing of need for patients to be caregivers. Caregivers can only have one patient. There's no longer the ability to provide excess cannabis that's grown to other patients. And while it's certainly true, as Mr. Birnbaum noted, there have been illicit uses of the medical marijuana program. On the whole, it's actually worked very well for many, many patients in this state, and we'd hate to see the desire to address the adult use have the effect of really undercutting the legitimate medical use for patients in the state. So we hope you'll look much more carefully at all the changes being made on the medical side, just as you're looking on the adult side. In addition, I want to talk about penalties. Senator Archambault mentioned a couple of the points we raised in our written testimony, but it goes beyond that. There are provisions in the original version of the budget article that essentially make an arrestable offense out of any violation of the statute or administrative regulations that are adopted. So these can be very technical violations, administrative violations, but each one of them, as the bill is worded, would constitute a criminal penalty. And we really want to urge you to look very carefully at the criminal consequences that flow from whatever language ends up in the bill. Related to that, the medical side generally continues, and the adult side provides the same sort of restrictions for people who have criminal records, including for drug offenses in the past. There are limits on caregivers being able to qualify as caregivers, and then on the adult side now with the with the regular cannabis processors and cultivators, there are criminal record check restrictions. And you may be aware that across the country, as states are dealing with legalization, they're trying to address the social justice issue associated with legalizing cannabis, and that is not penalizing those communities that have been most harmed by the criminalization of the drug for decades, and then preventing them from participating in the benefits once it's been legalized. And we really hope that you will take a careful look at what criminal record restrictions you want to put on individuals in order to prevent this really perverse punishment of the people who've most been harmed by what you're trying to address in dealing with legalization. The final point I want to make, and an important one for us, there's been discussion of it, and that has to do with employee protections. I know you've heard from the League of Cities and Towns raising concerns, but we think those protections are really crucial on both sides. First, on the medical side, we actually filed a lawsuit and obtained a court decision interpreting the current law, which is designed to provide protections to employees. As Norm indicated, the language is not as clear as it could be. We hope that the committee will take this opportunity of amending the law to make it perfectly clear that an individual who is using cannabis for medical purposes cannot be discriminated against any more than an employer would be able to discriminate against them through the use of a prescription drug or anything else they're using for a disability. Obviously, they do not have the right to be impaired on the job. Nobody is suggesting that, but that doesn't mean that an individual should be disqualified from employment simply because they are a cardholder or are responsibly using cannabis. And that applies on the adult side, too. Mr. Birnbaum noted that they didn't want to treat cannabis differently than alcohol or cigarette or tobacco is treated, but in fact, I don't think you'd find an employer who would disqualify an individual from employment because they had a glass of wine the night before. What employers are talking about is not hiring or being able to fire people based solely on their use of this lawful, if this passes, this lawful drug. And we're concerned about the implications of that, because what you're doing is you're passing a law saying this is perfectly legal to use, but good luck finding a job if you use it. I don't think that's a good way to go. I appreciate the interest in impairment, but again, employers have to deal with that, whether it's alcohol, whether it's prescribed drugs. They have to deal with that right now. It can be dealt with. I don't think there's a reason to single out this drug for special punitive treatment. And the one point I'd make about tobacco is this General Assembly actually passed a law that bars employers from discriminating against individuals based on their off-duty use of tobacco. So you already have gone that way. You have recognized that there should be limits on how employers treat employees outside the workplace when it isn't actually affecting their job performance. So with that, I'll end. I hope you will take a look at our written testimony and consider these points. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. As you heard, the amendment that we got to tail end of last week is 129 pages. It's a substantial. So I would just ask, when you take the time to review that, if you could provide the committee with any post-hearing comments that you have regarding those amendments would be greatly appreciated.
I would be very happy to do that.
Thank
Absolutely.
You, Senator Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephen, we might have talked about this in the past, though. So I'm not certain where you stand. I'm confused, I think, with regards to employers who require individuals to obtain a security clearance, whether it's confidential, secret, top secret, and we won't go beyond that. You're not saying that that should be disallowed?
No, and let me be clear. I mean, there are federal restrictions for certain employment, and we certainly would not suggest that this should be in violation.
I just want to be clear. I didn't think you did, but thank you.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments for Steve? Thank you for your testimony.